And it's here we are. It's the 2nd of April. We're inside the draft window. The draft is literally 3 weeks away. And the 49ers, for the first time in a couple years, have a number one pick because they did not trade this one for Trey Lance. So surprise, surprise, the Niners are due to pick at 31. And the big story surrounding the 49ers is a story that people, I don't know about you, but I'm tired of. I'm sure most people are tired of. And that is the future of Brandon Aiyuk and what's going to happen to Aiyuk. It's funny. You get into the season, well, there's a million stories, right? You go to down to Santa Clara, you talk to player A, you ask him 5 or 6 questions. There might be a story or two out of that. I go down there, do the same damn thing. There may be a story or two out of that. Then there's the stories that we see on the practice field, and it's like you look up and you're like, hey, there's like 15, 20 stories. In the off season, it's usually not the way it goes. Last year at this time, there were a lot of people going, Krug, will you stop saying that Trey Lance is going to be traded? He is our guy long term. He is not going to be traded. Shut up about you and your trades. And sure enough, he was traded. Unfortunately, it didn't happen until August. So that was still 4 more months of this. But this offseason, the kind of the story that won't die is this Brandon Aiyuk. Will he, won't he? Do they want him? Do they not? Are they going to trade him? Are they going to trade Debo? They're working out guys that are supposed to go in the middle of the first round, but they don't have a middle of the first round pick. So that makes you think that maybe he will get dealt. Then you have people saying, you know what? They're really Mike Garafolo from the NFL Network. They're very far apart in their 2 offers. And then the next day you've got Lynch. Hey, we really want this guy and this and that. Before we get into some Aiyuk stuff, where do you actually think this is? I mean, it's very difficult to separate the reports from fact. Do you think he's a Niner, always going to be a Niner, and Shanahan and Lynch are absolutely in love and they'll do whatever it takes? Do you think they've got a price and a cutoff point where they're like, if it gets beyond this, we're trading this guy? Or do you think that the master plan is to trade this guy? I mean, if you told me the master plan was to trade Aiyuk for a mid-first round pick, take a tackle, and then take a receiver at 31 in this draft, I could make an argument for some damn good receivers at 31. What do you think the master plan is with Aiyuk, if you had to guess?
Well, I think the master plan is for him to be Brock Purdy's catching partner for the next 7 years. I mean, I think that is their ideal situation, because I think when you look at his age, you look at all their expensive players, which if he stays, he'll become one. He is the one that fits on Brock's timeline the best, right? He fits better than Kittle and McCaffrey and Debo. Without, like, it's not even close. He's on the same timeline as Juwan Jennings from like a when he was drafted standpoint. He's young. When you pay Brandon Aiyuk, you're paying for his prime, Larry. You're not paying for past performance. And I think one of the worst, not one of the worst things, but like I think in some way they fear the unlikely, which would be somebody offering them a pick that they couldn't refuse, right? Somebody doing something illogical, like offering a mid-first round pick for Brandon Aiyuk, which doesn't make sense to do that. You can get the 3rd, 4th best receiver with a mid-round pick in the first round this year. So somebody shouldn't do that. Like it doesn't pencil. But if somebody did that, I mean, for what's best for the organization, I think they'd feel like, God, this is such great value, even though they know you're not getting Brandon Aiyuk's equivalent right now, maybe in 3 years, maybe in 2 years, but in all likelihood, not right now.
Right.
But I think the most likely outcome is he's playing, and I've said this for a while, Larry, that he's playing this year on the 5th-year option. And I think the conversation we're having about him now is like a more real conversation next year as it relates to Debo.
So you think Debo may get moved next year, is what you're thinking? Because I mean, if you ask me, and I've been talking about this the last couple weeks or last couple days, I think Aiyuk's coming back. I think they are going to draft a receiver somewhere in their first 2 or 3 picks. I would not be surprised if the Niners drafted a receiver either in the first or second round. I could see it. And then maybe a year from now, trading Debo Samuel if that receiver comes of age a little bit, for maybe something that's not kind of paltry in return, maybe like a fourth round pick, maybe a fifth round pick or something like that next year to some team that's not one of your arch rivals in either conference. That's kind of what I see as
Yeah.
far as wide receiver. I can't imagine. I love Xavier Leggett
Legit.
or Leggett from South Carolina. I see a lot of AJ Brown in him. I was watching Path to the Draft last night, and sure enough, they made that comparison. And it's
Mhm.
an easy comparison to make, right? They both played in the SEC. They're both big and strong and fast and physical. I can see that. I could see Malachi Corley being compared to a Debo Samuel out of Western Kentucky. I can see those comparisons, but it's such a projection. I mean, NFL wide receivers. I mean, Jerry, the greatest receiver of all time, wasn't great as a rookie. He was far better as a second year player. So, for whatever reason, and we could probably talk to Shanahan or some wide receiver coach about the intricacies of the position, but for some reason, wide receiver is like almost like a red shirt position where you can draft a guy, and for every Randy Moss there's like 100 guys who just can't do anything that rookie year, and then come out in that second year and they're like, hey, wow, look at this guy's ready to roll. He knows the offense, he's quick in and out of the breaks, he's so refined. And it's so I don't know that if you're a team in a Super Bowl window that it makes sense to trade a veteran wide receiver who's cooking, who's an all pro, even if you get your hand picked receiver in the draft. I just don't know if it makes sense.
Yeah, well, I don't think you're not getting a top 3 receiver even with an Aiyuk trade. It does not make sense for this year. Maybe it makes sense for 6 years from now, but you're really replacing the guy that, like replacing Aiyuk with another receiver right now. You're replacing the wrong guy. You're replacing the younger, cheaper guy.
Right.
It makes more
Right.
sense to replace Debo if you're going to replace anybody right now. And when the year to replace Debo is next year because his dead cap hit comes down precipitously. So like that to me is the window. Next year is the window. And the beauty with Aiyuk, like he's still showing up, he's still working out. He still makes $14 million this year. Like it's a significant increase in salary for him this year. So it's not like he's playing on a $2 million contract. So, like what that means is he can afford to wait for next year's contract. He can, you know. Now, as for the receiver part of it, like the draft part of it, I mean, they're probably going to draft one to your point. Like I went back and looked at all their 7 drafts. This will be their 8th. This will be Kyle and John's 8th draft. Okay. In the previous 7 drafts, last year was the first year in which they didn't take some combination of multiple receivers and running backs. They've done receiver and running back, or receiver and receiver, or running back and running back every year until last year. Last year, they drafted Ronnie Bell. The year before, it was Ty Davis Price and Danny Gray. The year before, it was Trey Sermon and Elijah Mitchell. The year before, Aiyuk and Jennings. 19, it was Debo and Jalen Hurd. 18, it was Pettis and Richie James. 17, it was Joe Williams and Trent Taylor. So they've taken 9 receivers, 4 running backs. And almost every year, they take some combination of multiples of that position. So they're doing it, Larry. Like they're taking a receiver and a running back, or they're taking 2 receivers, or they're like, that's going to happen in this year's draft. It happens almost every year for them.
It really shows too how difficult it is to handicap those 2 positions at its core, because those guys the Niners have swung and missed. And we'll look at the Niner draft history under Lynch and Shanahan later on in this stream.